This is your World War III update. I would encourage you to go and check out our interview with Brian Berletic over at the New Atlas. Highly informative, released it earlier today. In this video, I want to talk about the news, of which there is a lot to go over, but I also want to posit a theory for your consideration. Could it be that this supposed peace agreement that is being tabled is in fact a trap in order to provide political and military justification for a broader intervention in the Ukrainian war? Well, hear me out. Could it be that the United States and Europe are rushing to present a certain set of terms that would provide them the pretense to enter the conflict after Russia violates said agreement? Because it seems very odd that all of the leaders in Europe that matter would publicly humiliate and ingratiate themselves at the altar of Donald Trump when they don't really stand to gain much from this at all. They know full well that the Russians have very little intent of moving into Poland or the Baltic states, at least not for the next 10 years. And in that period of time, of course, Europe will be fully mobilized militarily. So what could the purpose of this possibly be? I suspect that they have a bigger plan, okay? Because this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If Trump wanted to stop this war, and I know there's a lot of people who are wooed by all the fakery that has went on with respect to this Alaska summit, Trump didn't do anything. He put on a show, okay? And I really want you to understand what's going on here, because if you look at the exchanges that we've seen in the last 72 hours between Ukraine and Russia, oil refinery after oil refinery, pipeline after pipeline, it is tit for tat, back and forth, escalation in all directions, and they're still flying American ISR manned planes very close to Russia's border, okay? So if Trump wanted to end this war, he could stop the weapons, he could stop the administration of the conflict with his generals, he could stop the intelligence sharing, he could cut off Starlink, he could do all of these things. None of these things he has done. So this is how you know it's all a big game, and Vladimir Putin is attempting to buy as much time as possible. I still do think that something big is going to happen in September with this very large military exercise that's going to take place in Belarus, where they're simulating nuclear drills and nuclear attacks against NATO. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to do a nuclear attack against NATO. It likely could be cover for a broader offensive. And if Vladimir Putin knows that this is all just a sham and possibly an agreement that is not only going to be used to further militarize Ukraine and bolster them some more, such that they become indomitable for any sort of future offensive, or it's just a trap that is going to be used to provide justification for a broader NATO intervention once Russia violates the agreement, which of course could come in the form of a false flag attack or who knows what. This seems like a trap to me, okay? Because it wouldn't make any sense at this point in time. If Trump wanted to end the conflict, he could immediately. So everything that you are being told about, you know, I'm the peace president, I ended 6 wars. I don't know where these wars are that he ended, to be brutally honest. I can't even name one. The Gaza war is still waging. The Israelis are getting ready to enter into that conflict. The Israeli or the Iranian war is still on ice. It's still up in the air. There is a reprieve in hostilities, but the war isn't over. In terms of the India-Pakistan thing, I mean, what was that even? Anyways, you know, they pretty much resolved that themselves, according to Indian officials. So you really have to ask yourself then, what kind of game is being played there? Because again, the European leaders stand nothing to gain from fighting the Russians at this point in time. Financially, politically, militarily, it is not the popular thing to do. So why do they drop everything and fly to Washington only to be put on the spot, humiliated by Donald Trump? Well, if you look at things just on a surface level, it might appear that that is what's happening. But people forget that Europe has leverage, okay? Europe has leverage in the form of money. They have a lot of money. If it's fiat money, that's fine. It's still money that people want. People have 20% of global reserve currency in euros right now, even though they have no natural resources are very little, and demographically they're wilting on the vine. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have power to bring to bear. They have a sizable population, and if they did mobilize for war, they have a history of doing so, which of course I'm sure the spirit of that would emerge at some point in time, as fanciful as they've become in many parts of Western Europe. I'm sure they could turn it on if they really had a reason to do so. So I suspect something bigger is going on here. That meeting, while it seemed one-sided with Donald Trump at the helm of the sinking ship, I would posit that it was actually them cooking up a plan to either bait the Russians, to get the Russians to try to put on ice whatever planned big air offensive they have up and coming, or it is all just a contrivance in order to set the precedent for a broader NATO intervention. This is why, and I hate even saying Trump, because Trump isn't running the show. If that isn't abundantly clear at this point, if he was, they would stop everything, okay, but they aren't. So clearly, you can't look at the politician. This is not Biden's war, this is not Trump's war. This is a war of, for lack of better terms, I hate it because it's overused and it's kind of a scapegoat and it's kind of a cop-out, but the deep state. Okay, that's the underlying continuity of government, the intelligence agencies, the shadowy elite, if you will, the military-industrial complex, who has immense amounts of power. And now, effectively, all they've done is said, well, the United States is simply just not going to pay for the weapons. But if you're Russia and you have U.S. generals in there dictating the terms, picking the targets, running the administration of the conflict. It is starting to rain out here. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that. You can hear it on the roof. Hopefully it's not messing with the sound too much. And the only caveat is that now Europe has to foot the bill, and they're still going to be there on the ground, because people who are saying stupid shit like NATO is going to be disbanded and this is the end of NATO, that's the dumbest thing. NATO is a tool of the U.S. empire. Okay, so the people who stand to benefit from NATO is the United States. Germany was ready to build a pipeline. They had the pipeline built to Russia to get cheap Russian gas, and the United States blew it up. Okay, so the U.S. needs NATO, all right? And they don't want people going rogue in that respect. So I suspect that this is a trap that's being set. I don't even think the Russians are going to go along with it. Maybe they will, because they know it's better than nuclear Armageddon coming sooner than later. But it just seems to be a time-buying exercise. Very similar to the desultory style negotiation that we've seen, for the first 5 months of Trump's term. This just seems like a policy of appeasement in order to basically drag the conflict on and try to prevent or at least inhibit any major offensives from being initiated. That's what this appears to be. So, and remember, this is historically precedented. We've seen this with the Munich Agreement in 1938, where Chamberlain met with Hitler, and they thought that they had an agreement on Czechoslovakia. They thought that everything was going to be kosher, probably not the best term to use in this context, but of course we know what happened thereafter. So premature peace agreements, not only can they fail because they fail to address the underlying inextricably linked complexity of Ukraine and Russian culture, political systems, military history, and all that stuff, but they also effectively set the terms for a broader military engagement, which is not something you necessarily have right now. It's incredibly vague in terms of the red lines that could potentially get crossed. But once you give security guarantees and you say that if the peace terms are violated, then Europe is going to either have a tripwire force in there, they're going to have peacekeepers in there, or they're going to have observers, or it's going to be some 24-hour standby rapid reaction force, what Meloni was talking about, that's going to sit in Poland and just wait for shit to pop off, or if it's going to be the United States as they're talking about providing air support or partaking in some aviational capacity, whatever that might mean. Creating an air bridge for troops. What does that mean, really? Providing a no-fly zone? I mean, of course, that would be something that would be a very slippery slope, which is not to say that it couldn't be managed, because, again, the Russians are incredibly patient. And we should be thankful that they are acting as rationally as they are and not resorting to unconventional means in a way that many of us suspected they would have long time ago. So in a way that the West would love for them to utilize, because that would provide full-blown justification for intervention. So we're seeing these very ambiguous Article 5 pledges being mulled at this point in time. And I don't know, the timing of all of this, the haste in which they're doing it, it's like they know something big is coming and they got to either put this on ice, or either it's related to this theater or it's something else, possibly in Taiwan, China. I'm not sure what the intelligence is. They've been flying recon planes very close to China for the last few days. China has been doing some interesting moves, like doing exercises surrounding Taiwan, moving ferries to the mainland opposite in the Taiwan Strait, opposite Taiwan, getting some people to speculate as to whether or not this is the real deal, or are they just trying to induce readiness fatigue. So we could see a pivot to anywhere. And it could be Venezuela. Maybe they see a window of opportunity there and they're trying to put this on ice. But of course, Venezuela has a military pact with the Russians, and it starts to look like what they're trying to do, same thing they did with Syria and Azerbaijan and Armenia, is they're trying to chip away at all of Russia's allies, the weak ones, piecemeal, go for that low-hanging fruit to effectively try to not only, with Venezuela, if you can get a hold of that, I mean, that's a gold mine, because you have, the most oil reserves in the world in a very small place that's very close to home. And while the U.S. Oil industry is not dialed into processing that type of oil, that's something that could be fixed over time. And of course, it provides them more leverage in the global oil markets. So I suspect that something big is coming in September, and they're trying to interdict that. Now, let's talk about the news that's happened today. There's a lot of it, all right? So we had a drone that crashed near Warsaw, okay? This is a Russian drone. Now, Poland didn't really do much about it. They mobilized some planes. There's a lot of NATO reconnaissance activity. This very well could have been a hack. This could have been, why would the Russians, this would be very out of character at this point in time to try to throw a whole wrench into the thing by sending a drone into Poland once again. So I think because it is historically precedented that Ukraine would fabricate lies about the origins of said ordnance, well, like they did back when they said it was a Russian missile when it was actually a interceptor, one of their own interceptors, S-200, possibly S-300. Anyways, it doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere. It's just going to mean more aviational activity and add to the body of support, which would like to see NATO's direct involvement in this conflict in some sort of aviational capacity, whatever that might mean. They probably work something out that would put the U.S. at a long enough arm's length that Russia would feel comfortable with. Because if you're the Russians right now, and people really got to wrap their heads around the bullshit that's going on. Because I know it looks really good, it looks tantalizing, this whole facade of diplomacy. But one thing is for certain, the war rages on in the shadows. The U.S. is administering it. They're providing recon, they're providing weapons. Whether they're giving them or selling them to Europe, that doesn't matter. Okay, that shouldn't matter to the Russians at all. The Russians should be concerned about the root of the problem, which of course is U.S. interests, which are attempting to cut Russia out of the natural gas market. That's what all of this is about. So, and this is what a lot of people miss about this whole thing, is that this is very much about energy dominance, global energy dominance. If you look at the chart, I don't have the chart here, but that shows U.S. LNG exports over the last 5 years, it's just went straight up, okay? And that was locked in, and that was under threat by Nord Stream. We're talking about I think it's a $26 billion just for the liquefied natural gas, not including oil. But that's only the beginning of a much bigger market, because you're going to see countries more and more dependent on this with the rise of AI and exponentially increasing energy needs in order to build out their super intelligent systems. So that's what this is all about. And Russia knows this, Vladimir Putin knows this, but he's just playing along, because what else can you do? It's that or a direct confrontation with the United States. So yeah, he'll take the meeting with Donald Trump. And quite frankly, and I don't like doing conspiracy theories, but I was thinking today, just going back and looking, if I'm Vladimir Putin, and it's been rumored that there's body doubles, and I know that this is a lot of NAFO nonsense 99% of the time, and I don't want people to run with this. I'm just throwing it out there because the thought occurred to me that maybe they cut that meeting so short, and maybe they were okay with Putin sending a body double, and they just, because they were doing this all for optics anyways, but maybe they cut it short because they knew it wasn't him. I don't know. Some of the body language in that press conference seemed like things that were, I don't know, unlike Putin. Mind you, we don't really see him in a lot of situations where he can't control all the variables. So maybe it was an extemporaneous knee-jerk reaction to the situation. But anyways, regardless, believe what you see. What do we see right now? We see day after day, hour after hour, massive bombardments of trains, oil refineries, gas pipelines, energy infrastructure, all this stuff that was supposed to be settled with a ceasefire long ago. Now, NATO argues that a ceasefire would benefit the Russians would benefit the Ukrainians, and that peace terms would actually benefit the side that's advancing. But if you believe in the Institute for the Study of War, and I listen to all opinions, okay, I've tried to get these people on the channel, and you'd be surprised. The only people who want to come on the channel are the people who the mainstream media claims are propagandists. So why doesn't the mainstream media want to come on the channel? I'm not doing, aggressive confrontational interviews. I want to hear what people have to say. But according to the ISW, they're saying that the Pokrovsk advance has effectively stalled. So, who do we believe? I guess we'll know who's lying in a little bit. But I don't think that's the crux of the issue. I think the crux of the issue is that Russia is planning to do a big air offensive. And here's my worry, all right? My concern is that when they do this offensive, that's when China makes their move. And maybe the U.S. has got wind of this, and this is why they're trying to play for time, and they're trying to make all these hasty decisions, okay? Now, if China is true to the art of war, and China, there's not a lot of history that we can analyze, at least in recent history, where we can understand how they might prosecute and initiate a conflict. I suspect if they are true to the art of war, and they do it to a T, then it is going to be a rapid blitzkrieg style attack that leverages every means at their disposal. And not necessarily an attack, because it could just be an encirclement of the island and a blockade and an embargo, which puts the United States in a very difficult situation. Because think about it, if China and Russia and Iran, for that matter, are really all strategically and militarily aligned, arguably the best thing for them to do at this point in time is to just everybody attack at once. And I mean, the fact that they're not doing that, maybe that means that they're not quite strategically aligned. Maybe that means that they're just not quite ready. Or maybe it means that they're getting ready to do that in September. What does that mean on the Iranian front? I don't know. Maybe it means unleashing Hezbollah, which is why Israel is pushing really hard in that direction as well, and why the Iranian foreign minister was there in Lebanon recently to show solidarity with whatever remains of Hezbollah. Perhaps this is why the IDF is calling up 60,000 more reservists in addition to the ones that they've already sourced. And now they're even talking about getting troops from the United States, the dual citizens, who have some sense and decided not to go and dislocate the religiously charged natives who have a right to the land that they're in, and piss them off, and then forever live under the threat of terrorism. Okay, that's pretty stupid to move from the United States, a place of just like infinite geographic potential, and move to a desert where there's water shortages and where they have to desalinate water, and where every day you have to worry about being bombed. I mean, that's just stupid. You know, like, why would you do that? Like, it just makes no sense. It's the Holy Land. It's the whole. It just doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It's really dumb. And anyways, I'm not going to go down that pathway, at least not yet. I'm not at my point in my career where I want to, you know, throw caution to the wind, we'll say. Anyways, US B-1B Lancers and Gripens conducted a flyover in Riga in, is that in Latvia? I think that's in Latvia, as NATO, as a show of force. Now, these B-1B Lancers, they say that they are no longer nuclear capable, but they're also the biggest bomber plane in the U.S. arsenal. They can carry the largest payloads. So that was interesting. If you're the United States, if you're Donald Trump, why would you be continuing to do all this posturing? Why are you still sending weapons if you want to end this war like the 6 other wars, or 7 or 8? And I don't know, like, is there some like African tribes that are fighting that he settled the deal with or something? 6 wars? I don't know where the 6 wars. Anyways, Latvia is accelerating their border wall project with sensors, barriers, and fortifications in anticipation of a war with Russia. Putin today made an interesting statement, and it's because it was the 80-year anniversary of the nuclear industry. But I thought it was some interesting, subtle messaging from the man himself when he said that Russia's nuclear shield reliably formed the country, marks 80 years of the nuclear industry. He praised decades of scientific and industrial effort, touted the sector's role in achieving strategic parity and national security, and highlighted ongoing technological and international cooperation through Rosatom. Effectively, praising the Russian nuclear capabilities and reasserting the fact that Russia's nuclear shield is formidable and a force to be reckoned with. So you're going to see a lot of these sort of veiled threats coming from both sides, like this flyover, the B-1B Lancers. But Putin is a professional. He's going to be as diplomatic as he can possibly be, until he isn't anymore. And that's when we're going to see what Trump is going to do. And again, it's not Trump. You can't look at it. The only leaders there are in the world are in the East, where they're in full control of their governments. And even Vladimir Putin, to a degree, has to appease their own lobbyists in that country. But he seems to have a much firmer control of the situation than Donald Trump does, or any president for that matter. Massive drone strikes by Russia, destroying Ismail oil depot near Romanian border, damages a Panama-flagged tanker. Russia faces gasoline and diesel shortages after repeated depot strikes. The Novorossiysk refinery in Rostov was struck again. Russian hackers, Killnet, Palak Pro, Usersec, Beregini claimed a breach, and they alleged that they have documentation of 1.7 million Ukrainian casualties. Now, I heard it reported as deaths. Casualties is semi-believable, but even that, I think, I don't know, it's hard to say. The other side, of course, is saying that it is all propaganda. We don't know what Ukrainian hospitals look like. I mean, if you think about it, 1.7 million deaths would imply probably at least 4 million casualties, because we know how these drones maim people. And I just can't see, there should be all kinds of footage of Ukrainian hospitals filled to the rim, unless it's an OPSEC issue, or they're just not putting people in hospitals. And I don't want to speculate on that, but something's off. You know, both sides are lying. It's incredible. And I always say this, but this day and age, when we have access to so much information, that the fog of war is so thick, it's worse probably than it was back in the day in terms of record keeping and who's telling the truth. I guess we're never going to know, arguably. Trump suggests that U.S. air support while Europe provides troops. NATO is discussing security guarantees. Now, again, what would this possibly accomplish? Again, at the end of all of this, the security guarantee is a nuclear weapon. You know, they can play this game of we're going to put troops in there, and then what? Okay, so the Russia starts attacking your troops, then what are you going to do? Do you have the tanks to deploy to combat the Russians? Probably not. By that time, who knows how war will have evolved? Are tanks even going to be useful? They're still probably going to be useful for quite a while, but do you have the land-based forces necessary to fight an attritional war with the Russians, whether it's with Ukraine or with NATO itself? Now, if Ukraine severely is drained of manpower and it's simply a manpower issue, well, of course, Europe will throw guys into the meat grinder, and they'll likely incentivize conscription of immigrants. That's going to be the solution for immigrants. In fact, this was all part of the plan. I talked about this for years, how this is the carrot they're going to dangle. And I think this was even pre-programmed. What do they say? The phrase escapes me. Predictive programming with Starship Troopers, where they say, you know, citizens, you're only a citizen if you serve your country. And so you only get citizenship, that is. So could this be the carrot they dangle, and they say, well, you know, we're going to have this new program in which maybe 50% of the people who get deployed to Ukraine will be people who immigrated to Europe illegally. And this gives them a fast track to citizenship. Who knows? They're going to do something. They have to do something that's simply a manpower shortage, if that's what it is. Now, again, at the end of it all is the threat of a nuclear weapon. And that is what is so concerning. This is what the United States doesn't want to. They want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to sell the weapons at a 10% premium, which is insane, because the U.S. is also saying that that 10% premium that they're selling the Europeans the weapons for is going to cover the costs of whatever sort of aviational support they provide in the form of a air bridge or a no-fly zone. So they're charging the Europeans. So again, at the end of the day, if you're the Russians and you're seeing all this, the people who are enabling this at the end of the day are the Americans. So the decision-making center finally lies in the Pentagon in Washington. So, you know, they'll be forced to ultimately bypass Brussels and do something to the United States once all the political niceties erode in their utility. Moscow rejects NATO troop presence as escalation. Was reiterated by the Russian Foreign Ministry, and Medvedev had some spicy language as well. Comment on this, why this is a non-starter for the Russians. So that appears to be out of the question. So this is why Meloni is floating this idea of a rapid reaction force that would sit outside of Poland, right on the border with Ukraine, and they would enter if there was any violation of the deal, all the while continuing to arm the Ukrainians, because of course the Russians don't want the militarization of Ukraine, but the Ukrainians aren't going to give that up. So it's very likely that all of this is just going to fail miserably. But if it does succeed, as I said at the beginning of this video, the risk is that it's a trap, right? To get, you know, because then you set the terms, and then all it takes is one rogue element within the Ukrainian military to stage a false flag attack and claim that the Russians attacked them. Then the EU and NATO and the United States has their justification, casus belli, to enter into the war. Moscow rejects U.S. troop presence. Talked about that. Italy proposes a non-NATO security guarantee plan for Kiev. I just talked about that as well. Hungary-Slovakia crisis after Ukraine strikes the Druzhba pipeline flows. While apparently service has been restored, I don't know how it can be completely unimpeded, though, because it was a pretty big fire. Russia has a tendency to downplay these things, as do the Ukrainians. Reports suggest that the West is maneuvering to sideline Zelensky. So it appears as though Seymour Hersh's prediction that they're going to get rid of him and replace him with Zelensky is correct. With Britain gaining influence over Ukraine's election infrastructure, speculation centers on a potential transfer of power to figures like Zelensky, though his team denies any election plans. I guess we'll wait and see. I figure if you're getting ready to really go to war, then you're going to want a former military commander at the helm of that sinking ship. Russia's Admiral Nakhimov, nuclear battle cruiser, returns to sea trials after decades. So now they're going to be utilizing a nuclear battle cruiser potentially in combat within striking distance of Ukraine. So that's a radiological incident waiting to happen with all of Ukraine's naval drone capabilities. If they were to strike that battle cruiser that has a nuclear reactor and nuclear weapons, for all we know, well, that could be a very big problem, depending on where it sinks. So, you know, that they're getting ready to redeploy that is concerning. Just another potential possibility for something to go wrong. Israel is launching a massive assault on Gaza City. They're calling up 60,000 reservists. Iran has closed public offices in half the country due to extreme heat and power strain. So, of course, air conditioning is very strained, as well as water shortages. Israeli military is considering recruitment in the U.S. amid significant soldier shortages. The Chinese Navy is amassing ships, ferries, and landing craft in the Taiwan Strait as Taiwan raises the alert. The U.S. is secretly deploying long-range missiles in the Philippines to counter what they perceive to be the Chinese threat. South Korea, and those could potentially be nuclear. South Korea conducts nationwide civil defense drill. This is not uncommon, but still important in light of the broader geopolitical uncertainty. The U.S. Surveillance flights near Russian and Chinese borders have surged significantly in and around Kaliningrad, along the Polish-Ukraine border, in the Baltics, in China, in and around China, in between the Korean Peninsula and China. Russia accuses U.S. of sabotaging arms exports to India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. So it's a big arms and energy racket, and the United States wants to be the main distributor of all of those things and is trying to cut Russia out of the market. This, of course, could be economically existential for the Russians, insofar as they'd like to achieve a standard of living that we've grown accustomed to here in the West. In Venezuela, Maduro is activating a 4.5 million strong militia, whatever that means. Do they all have firearms? Do any of them have training? It's hard to know. It's a very challenging jungle terrain, I presume. I don't know much about Venezuela, but I presume there is also a reason why they couldn't take down Chavez for the longest time. So it appears as though they're going to try to go for what they perceive to be the low-hanging fruit. For all we know, it could be another fruitless endeavor. But they're certainly becoming emboldened in these, as depicted in these more brazen military misadventures. Trump is deploying 3 U.S. destroyers off of Venezuela, plus the littoral combat ship in Curaçao. The Amphibious Readiness Group waits in Norfolk. I believe that has several thousand Marines on it. Again, you're going up against a country of millions. I mean, that's a Vietnam situation all over again, unless they have some very good intelligence and people who are willing to cooperate on the inside. Trump is pushing Alaska LNG to Japan, South Korea to undercut Sakhalin-2, which is a planned Russian pipeline into those regions. So again, on all fronts, whether it be the corridor that's been now established and will be policed by U.S. troops off the Caspian into Azerbaijan, or in Syria, or in Europe with Nord Stream, or now in the East, they're trying to cut Russia entirely out of the energy market, all right? And so this is why it takes a lot for Vladimir Putin to eat crow and go and subject himself in the same way that all the EU leaders had to subject themselves. And where we see that foreshadowing of the stealth bomber simulating a decapitation strike over his head as he walks down the red carpet. That's the circus we live in. ExxonMobil is positioned to regain a stake in Sakhalin-1 under a new Putin decree. So this is where they're trying to broker some sort of deal, or at least this is where they're trying to, make appeasements, right? U.S. is adding 10% markup on arms sold to Europe for Ukraine to offset air support costs, which is funny. Analysts frame energy cooperation as Trump deal-making. Critics call it a peace dividend for U.S. firms. Anyways, guys, price of gold remains hovering around the 3,400 mark, which means that nothing has fundamentally changed. When that price of gold starts to plummet, you'll know that peace is here. Unless, of course, that price of gold is really only reflecting dollar debasement, and it's really not even factoring in World War III yet, which I find hard to believe. it's certainly factoring in the multipolar potential for multiple competing currencies. But as it stands, the US dollar is still the reigning defending global hegemon. But it appears as though the US military is taking the strategy of like a Jake Paul. They're only picking fights they know they can win. So, you know, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Syria, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Lebanon, whether it's Iran, I don't think they're really going to be able to do much in China unless they throw another proxy to the wolves, be it the Philippines, be it the Taiwanese, who I don't think are going to willingly destroy their entire society for that. And China has so much leverage in that situation that they haven't utilized it yet at all. Tells you that they still think there's more to gain through negotiations than there is to lose. So we still have a little bit more time. I want to get Martin Armstrong on the channel. Apparently he has some computer algorithm. He's a fairly well-connected guy. And he thinks it's all going to culminate in 2026. But when asked what that means, he says more of the same. So this is why I want to get him on the channel to try to explain this in a bit more detail. Anyways, my friends, I've been busy prepping, like just prepping. You know, I've just been working on the acreage. We just got a massive harvest of honey this year, like 10 gallons, and I'm only halfway there through one hive, okay? And I haven't even tapped the other hive. So at the end of the day, we're gonna be getting a huge harvest of honey. We're gonna show you how we did that. It's so much easier than I thought, which is not to say that beekeeping isn't without its periodic complications, but it's a lot easier than people think, and it's insane. You feel bad because you're stealing all the shit from the bees that work so hard for it. But yeah, it's liquid gold. And in terms of the harvest, vegetable harvest is great. We got chickens now, and we're just trying to build out these resiliency systems because, you know, we know what's coming, and it's going to get rough. And the Canadian government, you know, is going to make sure that they complicate things as much as possible. When austerity kicks in, that's when, you know, we're going to see a whole new rung up the authoritarian ladder. And I would encourage you to go check out our interview with Brett Weinstein, where he lays that out in immense amounts of detail as to why they discourage or look down on prepping, because it's antithetical to the economic system as it stands. But I'm doing everything I can, and I'm going to be releasing a video in the next few days, which is all about how I've devised the system, leveraging AI in order to help people find land that is going to be prepper worthy. And we're looking at, I'm going to start a new series where I show people this system. I show you different tools that you should use to reference if you are planning on buying a property from a prepping point of view. So this is different than what like a Curtis Stone would do, where he's kind of talking about it more, you know, they're the kind of guys, they don't like calling themselves preppers, but they're kind of prepper adjacent. I'm looking at this from the prep perspective of, if the shit hits the fan, where do you want to be, okay? And I think what I've put together is fairly robust and reliable in terms of assessing a property's SHTF readiness. Now, it's right now, anyways, a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at are limited to Canada, but I'm going to start looking at American properties as well. And everything I talk about will be pertinent to American properties. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. I'm really looking forward to it because there's so many interesting properties out there right now, and they're not always the ones that are the most expensive. In fact, in many situations, and I have this sort of inverse real estate rule where the most expensive now will be the least expensive. It's kind of like a first will be last and the last will be first, but for SHTF real estate, you know. So that property that's, you know, on that nice peninsula in Florida, it costs $50 million now, will be the worst possible place to be when it hits the fan, you know, contrasted with that place in the middle of butt crack nowhere, which nobody wants, but will be the best place to be. But there's also a balance of, you don't want something so remote that you can't access it and you can't build it out and maintain it. That is very important. So it's easy to just say, I'm going to buy land in the middle of Alaska, but that's not realistic. So I try to balance out a multitude of factors. In fact, there's 12 primary categories, and I utilize a lot of different charts and graphs of various software that allows you to find information about various properties from a prepping point of view. Anyways, that's what we got coming. We also have, what else do we got in the works here? Some more interviews planned, big names interviews that I'm looking forward to. I'm not going to say who it is until we fully lock it in, but it's going to be big. And just a lot of preparedness stuff. We got a lot of gear, and as you guys know, we're ceasing in the distribution at CanadianPreparedness.com, which is going to be a huge relief. I appreciate all of the well wishes, but understand this is entirely by choice, okay? I just simply don't want to have to deal with the retail aspect of this anymore. We're moving strictly to affiliate drop shipping, and that way I don't have to deal with the government, the postal agencies, the insurance companies, the tech monopolies, the customs and the borders and all that shit. I can just focus on prepping, making videos, doing the daily updates, and life is going to be a lot better when that happens. We're making sure that the staff who are going to be let go have ample amounts of severance. Nobody's getting let go into nothing. I refuse to do that. If I have to get them working, doing nothing for months until they find a good job, I'll do that. I'm just that kind of person. Okay, I don't believe, I treat my workers very well. And I want them to, I know that this is just a stepping stone for a lot of them. But in terms of the communist camera crew, graphics artists, cameraman, editors, they're not going anywhere. And we may still have some sort of administrative role here as well. But things are just downsizing to a studio manageable size, so I can focus on my family, I can focus on the acreage, I can focus on this video is what I'm passionate about. And so that means that there's big sales coming up. Right now it's 20% off store-wide, 20% off store-wide. Not one of these bullshit Canadian Tire, we jack the price up 90% and then we lower the price by 90% and say it's the best savings ever. This is actually a real deal 20%. Like some of this stuff you'll never get up for 20% off, much less 10% off, much less 20% off. I think the coupon code was 20 Prepper or Prepper 20. I'll post it in the description below. So go and load up, because especially if you're in Canada, a lot of this stuff I bring in from the States, whether it's personal protective equipment, self-defense tools, just really, unique and rare products that you can only get at CanadianPreparedness.com. You're not going to be able to get that stuff anymore. And if you do, you're going to have to import it. And it's just a pain in the ass. So you might as well get it now. And that's what's going on. All right. Keep on prepping, my friends. Talk to you soon.